Thank you, everybody, for being here this morning. My name is Tess Harris. I'm the Staff Hearing Officer for the City of Santa Barbara. And today is the April 15th, 2026 Staff Hearing Officer meeting. We have one item on the agenda today. But before we do that, I'm just going to go through item 1 for preliminary matters. Item 1A, we don't have any requests for continuance, withdrawals, postponements, or any addition of items. Item B, announcements and appeals. I also don't have any announcements today, and we don't have any appeals to announce either. So we're going to move into comments from members of the public for any items that are not on the agenda. So if you want to speak on an item that is not 335 South Milpas, this is your opportunity. If you're in the audience, you can fill out a slip or come on up.
At this time, I don't have any speaker slips for under general public comment. If anyone wants to speak under general, you can approach the podium at this time. I'll also just remind the audience, if anyone wants to speak under the item today, you can fill out a speaker slip along the far wall from me and bring it up to me, and I'll call your name under that item. So I'll move to virtual participation. If anyone online wants to speak under general, you can raise your hand at this time. But I'm not seeing any raised hands, and we didn't receive any written correspondence under general, so I'll give it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Carmen. Okay, so we will move on to item 2, which is the project 335 South Milpas Street. I'm going to go ahead and read the project description into the record, and then I'm going to have staff give a staff presentation followed by the applicant. And then after the presentations, we will open it up for public comment at that time. I will take all public comment then, and then I will come back to me for questions and comments. So I'm going to start out with the project description. The project site is a 107,285 square foot lot located at the northeastern corner of the South Milpas Street and Calle Puerto Vallarta intersection. The site is a single legal lot but has been designated with 2 APNs. The area that's designated with the APN ending in 003 is identified on the city's regional housing needs assessment, suitable sites inventory, as having a capacity of 27 residential units, which the project exceeds. The other APN is subject to an easement in favor of the railroad. And this project is proposing demolition of 3 of the 4 existing commercial buildings on site, a 2-lot subdivision, retention of the existing commercial building containing the Tri-County Produce Market with some additions and reconfigurations, and construction of a new 53-unit, 4-story residential building with a roof deck and ground-level parking garage, which contains 54 parking spaces. There are tree removal items, or trees that will be removed from the project, and then some street trees protected in place. The project is using the state density bonus law and is requesting a concession of parking requirements and waivers of variable density, including bedroom count, or variable density, which is bedroom count, height, outdoor living space, and front setback standards for those waivers. And the applications that are under my purview today as the staff hearing officer are the coastal development permit to allow the development in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone, a tentative subdivision map to allow the division of the lot into 2 lots, and a CEQA determination that the project qualifies for an exemption. Just a note, if you have concerns around the design of the project, really that would fall under the Architectural Board of Review. But this meeting, again, will focus on the subdivision map, the coastal development permit, and the CEQA document. And then if it is approved today, then the project requires a state density bonus approval by the community development director for 10 residential units and applicable concessions and waivers by providing 5% of the base density as very low income units. And then, as I mentioned, the design approval from the Architectural Board of Review. So before I turn it over to staff, I just wanted to make a note really quickly. I don't know everybody in the audience, but thank you all for being here today. I have received a number of public comments. I've reviewed them all. I've also been to the site many times before, but in particular more recently, and looking specifically at the site while thinking about this project in place. I do this for any project that has differing thoughts, particularly when they come for public comment. But I just want to sort of set the stage that this is a neighborhood, and for everybody in the audience to be respectful, regardless of what your perspective is on the project or what your hope is on the project. My hope is that after this, regardless of the decision that's made, that as a neighborhood, the people in the area, and then whatever happens with this project, the owner of the project, can all get along. In a similar note, I wanted to make a note for the staff that has been working on this project, because there have been some different twists and turns, and so I just really want to thank staff for bringing the project forward, and for the what I think is a very comprehensive staff report, recognizing that there were challenges just in the project review, and so just wanted to give thanks to the staff. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff for a presentation, and then followed by the applicant for their presentation.
All right, thanks, Ms. Harris. I'll just jump right in. I have a lot to get through. Let's see. Let it load, it looks like. Okay, there we go. It's just a little delay. Okay, so I'll start off with the vicinity map. The project site is located at the northeastern corner of Milpas Street here in Calle Puerto Vallarta, and it is just south of the Highway 101 on and off ramps up above. The site is located in the East Beach neighborhood as defined by the city's general plan, and in the East Beach component of the city's coastal land use plan. The land use designation is commercial, medium-high residential, which you can see in the pink here. It's surrounded by hotel, residential, parks and open space, as well as some industrial land uses. The site has a zoning classification of commercial with a coastal overlay. The zoning is related to the land use and includes hotel, motel, residential, parks and recreation, as well as some light manufacturing. The site is located in the non-appeal jurisdiction of the city's coastal zone. The site itself is approximately 2.5 acres in size. It is a single lot that consists of 2 APNs. The northern APN, shown in blue here, is subject to an easement in favor of the Union Pacific Railroad. And then the southerly APN contains the existing commercial development. Here I've just shown a couple aerial images of the site. One is looking west towards town. The other is looking east towards Montecito. I just really want to give a feel for this area south of the railroad in an orientation that's a little different than that typical north-south that we're usually looking at. The project consists of a 2-lot subdivision. Lot 1 would be located at the corner of Milpas and Calle Puerto Vallarta. It will be approximately 3/4 of an acre in size. Lot 2 would contain the remainder of the site, including the entire railroad easement. It would be 1.73 acres in size. The project would demolish 3 of the existing 4 buildings on site, as well as some pavement areas and parking. It would retain the existing building that contains the Tri-County Produce Market. Oops, wrong way. The resultant Lot 1 would include that retained market building. It proposes an addition to the market shown in yellow here along Calle Puerto Vallarta, as well as a new outdoor patio shown in beige here along Milpas Street. It would also include an expanded parking lot north of the building, which would include 45 automobile spaces and 6 bicycle spaces. The resultant Lot 2 would include a new residential building. It would be 4 stories in height with 53 residential units, a roof deck, and a ground parking lot. That would include 50 automobile parking spaces and 40 bike spaces. And no development is proposed in the easement, of course. The residential building also includes 2 common outdoor areas. This here is the roof deck I just mentioned. It's this L-shaped space. And then on the second level, there's a triangular-shaped outdoor courtyard. The project invokes state density bonus law to include 10 units above base density and seeks a concession for parking standards and waivers of variable density, height, outdoor living space, and front setback. And as you mentioned, the applications before you today are the coastal development permit, the tentative subdivision map, and the CEQA document. Other approvals that would be required, as you also mentioned, are that state density bonus approval of the community development director and ABR approvals of project design and final approval. So here I want to take a step back in time and look at some background, and I'll start with the original proposal. When we first saw this project, it included demolition of all 4 buildings on site and construction of 1 new building to include a market space. The entry is shown here, as well as 99 residential units and 127 automobile parking spaces. So this was first submitted on a pre-application for staff review in October of 2022. Staff was generally supportive of the project, but had concerns regarding traffic queuing, circulation, loading, and coastal public access. In June of 2023, the proposal went before the Planning Commission just to get their input on a building height exception, which was contemplated at the time, as well as the coastal development permit. Planning Commission was supportive of the proposal in terms of coastal policies, location, design approach, density, and amenities. They requested further study of traffic, parking, environmental impacts, and bicycle facilities. In August of 2023, a formal application for this proposal was submitted, and a month later, the application was deemed complete. This is fairly common for a first submittal, nothing unusual there. The letter noted the previous concerns of staff and the Planning Commission. In July of 2024, the application was submitted and included a revised project. The scope of work was reduced to include retention of the existing market building and construction of 53 residential units as opposed to 99. This slide here is just to illustrate the difference between the revised project, which is the current project before you today, as well as that original project. In August 2024, the application was deemed incomplete, which again is fairly typical. Staff remained supportive of the project, but cited concerns regarding the Milpas Street driveways, parking, and loading components of the project. In January of 2025, the applicant resubmitted the application and cited state law to claim the application had been deemed complete and consistent with objective code and policy by operation of law. And this was due to a staff miscalculation of the 30-day Permit Streamlining Act deadline for the completeness letter sent in August of 2024. As such, in February 2025, staff called the application complete and provided a complementary consistency review. And from there, the environmental review phase started, which I will talk about a bit later. Sorry, the PowerPoint response is a little slow. Okay, so here I want to jump even further back in time to the 2017 Lower Milpas Pedestrian Improvement Project, just briefly. This was a state grant-funded active transportation project for safety enhancements related to safe routes to school. Here you can see images of before and after. You can see the parking lot used to be located here in front of Milpas, in front of the building along Milpas, as well as along the southerly side of the building along Calle Puerto Vallarta. It's now located to the north of the building here. You can also see the sidewalk and driveway changes. 700 linear feet of sidewalk was constructed from Cabrillo down towards the beach to the northern side of the railroad tracks. You can see some of that here along the project site. 565 linear feet of sidewalk infill was constructed along Calle Puerto Vallarta, connecting Milpas to Dwight Murphy Park. That was mainly on the southern side of Calle Puerto Vallarta, but you can see here this driveway here was closed as part of that, and the sidewalk was extended a bit further up here. This made the 15 existing parking spaces inaccessible. So the city public works included this new parking lot, as well as 2 new curb cuts, a new driveway. They put an accessible parking space here, as well as a bike loop on the sidewalk. So jumping back into the project, we'll look at the subdivision map first. The proposal is compliant with lot area, frontage, and access, as well as lot line location requirements of the code. Also of note, as part of public improvements, new sidewalk would be added along Calle Puerto Vallarta, and these 6 existing curb cuts would be closed. Access for Lot 1 would be taken from the 2 existing curb cuts on Milpas Street. The southerly driveway would be 2-way in and out. The northerly driveway would be exit only and right turn only up Milpas. Access for Lot 2 would be taken here along Calle Puerto Vallarta, just 1 in and out entrance. And looking at state density bonus law, its application to the project means a total of 57 residential units could be allowed, while 53 are proposed. The math is shown here just for reference. Base density is, sorry, this should say 47. Base density is 47 units. 5% of those units would be restricted to households meeting the criteria for very low income, for a 20% density bonus, and that's those 10 extra units. I'll mention also the project does include a 1 moderate income restricted unit as well. And in exchange, as I mentioned earlier, the project seeks concessions and waivers, making it feasible to build. Project seeks a concession for parking standards to provide less than is required by the zoning ordinance while still meeting demand. I'll point out for the residential component, they're proposing more bike parking than is required. A waiver for front setback standards is requested for the residential development to encroach into the front setback. That's shown in yellow here. A waiver for height standards is requested to exceed the 45-foot height limit of the code. You can see some portions of the building would exceed that for a total of 56 feet in height. The majority of this is for a restroom that would serve the roof deck, as well as an elevator shaft and stairwell that are exempt from height requirements. The project requests a waiver for outdoor living space standards to not provide the area and dimensions required by code. As I mentioned earlier, the project does include 2 common areas. It also provides balconies for each unit. However, these areas just don't meet the area and dimensional requirements. And then lastly, a waiver for variable density is requested to not meet the standards. They're kind of complicated. I posted the code here, but basically they're based on lot size and bedroom count of each unit, and would require an approximate 106,000 square foot lot to comply. So I'll move into policy consistency. The project must be found consistent with the California Coastal Act, the city's local coastal program, as well as the city's general plan as it relates to subdivision findings. And as I mentioned, the site has a land use designation of commercial, medium-high residential. This typically consists of commercial neighborhood serving centers within residential areas that provide access to goods and services, as well as improve livability and sustainability of the area. This site is located within a visitor serving area of the city that includes overnight accommodations, recreational facilities, and of course the beach. There's also multi-unit residential development in this area. And I'll mention too, there are 3 remaining single-unit residential sites in this area. Again, the site is located within a commercial zone. Allowed land uses include residential, hotel, grocery stores, restaurants, office, etc. And so here I'll go through the different categories of policy that we discussed in the staff report and how the project is compliant with them. We looked at neighborhood and mixed-use planning policy, which encourages a mix of land use in commercial areas, such as the subject site, including a variety of housing types and affordability ranges, and neighborhood serving uses. We also looked at policy around local serving commercial growth, which seeks to protect the city's environment and character while encouraging small and local businesses to meet the needs of residents, workers, and the larger community. We looked at policy around residential growth, which encourages such development near transit and commercial services, and encourages increased residential density and affordable rental housing. So in looking at the project against that group of policy, again, the project would retain the existing Tri-County Produce Market, which is a full-service grocery store. It's a small local business that has been serving the community for over 50 years. Project also proposes new residential development, which is considered infill. It's located near transit and commercial services. At 53 units, we're seeing that increased density that the policies encourage, and they include a variety of residential units. There are studios, 1-bedrooms, and 2-bedrooms, with 4 income-restricted units. I'll also mention the site is on the city's suitable sites inventory, which is related to our regional housing needs allocation, which anticipated 27 units, so we would be getting more with this project, which is a good thing. We also looked at policy around visual resources, which seek to preserve and protect public views without precluding reasonable development. Scenic resources in the area include discontinuous views of the hillsides and mountains to the north, kind of depending where you are within the public right-of-way. The project site itself does not include any scenic vista, it is not a feature within any scenic vista, and is not designated as a visual resource in any city document. Furthermore, the project has been reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review 3 times. It received positive comments at its last meeting in terms of massing, design, and landscape. The ABR is specifically tasked with the responsibility to protect and preserve the natural and historical charm and beauty of the city and its aesthetic appeal and beauty. And again, the project would need to return to ABR for approvals if the project receives approvals here today. We also looked at parking and coastal access policy, which seeks to provide maximum coastal access by facilitating the provision of transit service, locating commercial facilities near residential uses, non-automobile circulation, such as bicycles, facilitating adequate parking, and the provision of parks or on-site recreation. In looking at the project, alternative transportation near this site includes Class 2 bikeways, shown in the blue lines here, and MTD bus stops for lines 14 and 20. The routes are shown in lines, and then I've included red stars for the bus stops. In terms of key public access parking areas, there are off-street and on-street options in the area. The blue areas indicate parking lots, and there's faint green lines here and along Cabrillo that indicate on-street parking. Lastly, because the project does invoke state density bonus law and seeks a concession for parking standards of the code, staff needed to ensure that sufficient on-site parking is provided because the project still needs to meet coastal policy, which says demand must be met on-site. So staff relied on a parking demand analysis prepared by Associated Transportation Engineers. The analysis concluded that 45 automobile parking spaces would meet peak demand for the commercial component, and 50 would meet peak demand for the residential component. And this is what the project proposes. And then lastly, we looked at policy around traffic. There is policy that requires development projects to be consistent with the city's traffic management strategy of the non-residential growth management program. This requires that projects are consistent with this strategy. The strategy itself seeks to ensure that no development uses a disproportionate share of traffic capacity at impacted intersections in an effort to moderate traffic congestion created by non-residential development. The applicant submitted a traffic study and a subsequent transportation policy consistency, site access, and circulation analysis, both of which were prepared by Associated Transportation Engineers. That essentially concluded the project would not result in a significant traffic or circulation impact. In response, the city's transportation planning staff issued a memo identifying several areas of concern, largely vehicle queuing at the railroad. ATE responded, clarifying their conclusions. However, transportation staff continued to have concerns. At this point, the applicant team expressed some concern regarding the conflicting expert opinions, so it was determined a third-party peer review would be appropriate. That review was conducted by EPD Solutions, who ultimately found project-related impacts to intersection operations, queuing, and site access are not anticipated to be significant. They also found the project consistent with applicable general plan and coastal land use plan policies. And this is when considering both the commercial and residential components of the project, just to clarify. So that's a quick rundown of all the policies we looked at and discussed in further detail in our staff report. So I'll move into environmental review. The project is not eligible for a categorical exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. This is because there's a leaking underground fuel tank within the parcel. The actual tank has been removed from the site, however, it's still considered a left site. The site is undergoing remediation with oversight from the Central Coast Regional Water Control Board and the Santa Barbara County Environmental Health Services. A condition of approval of the project includes completion of a corrective action plan, including all related remedial measures. And here, Ms. Harris, I'll mention this condition needs to be added. We inadvertently left it out and definitely want it to be in the conditions. The project did qualify for a streamlined CEQA review under section 15183, which is for projects that are consistent with a general plan for which a program environmental impact report, or EIR, was prepared, and limits environmental review to effects that are peculiar to the site. An additional EIR is not required when impacts are not peculiar to the site and are addressed in the program EIR, or when they can be mitigated with uniformly applied development policies and standards. A 2011 program EIR was prepared for the city's general plan. It evaluated citywide environmental effects from the forecasted general plan build-out through 2030. The project is consistent with land use, general plan land use and development density as contemplated in the EIR. As such, a 15183 environmental checklist was prepared by CSG, which is a city consultant, and reviewed by city staff. It found the project would not result in a peculiar impact, a significant impact, a potentially significant impact off-site, or a more severe impact due to substantial new information not known at the time of the prior EIR. Therefore, no further environmental review is required. There are no project-specific environmental impacts that would result from the project. Any potential minor effects would be addressed by project design and with compliance with applicable ordinance provisions, regulations, and standard conditions of approval. Moving on to design review, as I mentioned, the project has been before the ABR 3 times on concept review. The board ultimately found the project would conform to the required compatibility findings and urban design guidelines. They found that improvements to the massing design had been made, and they recommended some design refinements and simplifications. And again, if the project is approved here today, it would need to go back to the ABR for approvals. With that, staff recommends the staff hearing officer approve the project, making the findings outlined in section 10 of the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A. So I'll conclude my presentation here. Of course, I'm happy to take questions later on. I'll mention we also have Julia Pujol in attendance. She's our environmental analyst. We have Megan Arciniega. She's our development review supervisor. And then attending remotely via Zoom, we have staff from CSG, the CEQA consultant, as well as staff from EPD Solutions, who conducted that third-party transportation review. With that, I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burkhart. I will now pass it off to the applicants for an applicant presentation.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and I'm the land use planner on this project. And we've got Brian Cornell, the architect. We also have Scott Schell from Associated Transportation Engineers here for traffic questions if they come up. And we've got Nicole Greer from CJM Landscape Architecture if you've got any detailed questions about the landscaping that we don't already cover as Brian goes through the architecture here. So Barbara did a really comprehensive staff report and presentation, so we're just going to go through finer points of the architecture, and Brian's going to walk you through how we went about doing this and how it came to be the way it is now.
Yeah, honestly, Jared, I think Ms. Burkhart did such a good job. I don't need to really, I think the project was very well presented for her. I just want to make a couple of points. First, I think we're very pleased that we did end up saving Tri-County Produce. The original project, as described by Ms. Burkhart, was very different, and so I think all of us are really pleased with that. And obviously, we're reducing a lot of commercial square footage, you know, removing over 11,000 square feet on the site and putting back only a little over 4,000, which will make the Tri-County Produce more viable. And obviously, as this view shows here, you know, we're going to add a wonderful little outdoor seating area along Milpas, which I think really adds a nice charm to the project. As far as the residential, I think, again, Ms. Burkhart made it clear that we could have built more units here. Instead of 57, we're building 53, and I think the other really important thing to emphasize is that we're not only doing the 3 very low, which allows that 20% state bonus density, but we unilaterally chose to add an additional 1 moderate. Because this project is not in the ADU, it isn't required to have that, but we felt that it was an important thing to do for the community. So I really, with that, I'm available for questions relative to the architecture. I know Jarrett has a few comments that he wanted to make, and then we can move on.
Yeah, so I mean, I really don't have a lot to add. There were a few things I saw in a couple of the public comment letters that I could address if there's questions about those. I think the biggest one I saw is this assertion that somehow the railroad easement area doesn't count as part of our property and can't be used to calculate density. And I think that's just the commenter's misunderstanding of what net lot area is. And net lot area is the gross lot area of the parcel minus any easements that are dedicated for public street purposes. So any other easements, power lines, visual easements, if any kind of easement other than public street purposes does not come out of your lot area. So the fact that there's an easement that restricts what we can build in a certain area of our lot doesn't change the area of the lot itself and then how you would calculate density. So I think that was like the biggest thing I saw there. There was one comment on, you know, how could we possibly construct this if it touches that easement line? And you know, I mean, people do this all the time with buildings in the city. The Housing Authority project, I think, is one of the best examples of this over there by Dune Coffee, which, like, that actually has buildings right up to where that building is. And somehow it's possible to build these things. We do it, like the DMHA project over on Haley, they have permission from the next door neighbor. They actually put their crane on the neighboring property site. And we'll get permission from the railroad to use that area if we need it. And a substantial amount of this can be done from our side of the property line in any case. So, you know, the specter of not being able to build this project because there's an easement on here, I think, is a little bit overblown. So I didn't really see anything else that I would want to mention up front, but if you have any questions, either I can address it or one of our other consultants here can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Gorin and Mr. Colonel. So I am going to now open it up for public comment in the room. If you are a member of the public that would like to speak on this item, you can come on up to the podium at this time. And I'll pass it over to Ms. Carmen as well for more specifics.
Thank you. I do have one speaker slip for in-person public comment. So if Stephanie Diaz wants to approach the podium, you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Diaz. I'm a 10-year resident of the East Beach neighborhood. So I know a lot about the goings-on and a lot about the neighbors. And so I'm here kind of representing myself, my ideas, and also my neighbors who have been knocking on my door. So first of all, what we want to say is we're so pleased that Tri-County Produce is remaining. It is such a go-to place for our neighborhood and keeps those traffic and parking issues down. We wish that these comments be included into the findings that are made. And I'm assuming that there's going to be some approvals here. It's a project that I think has been scaled way down, and I understand the what do I want to say, the rental unit that we're going to be pricing and such that we're going to be getting. But we do have some issues. First, the project, as we see it, is a gateway to the whole East Beach area. We have the ocean, we have Chase Palm Park, we have the entire neighborhood, which is very compact, and some like the Dwight Murphy Park and the Cabrillo Park that are kind of recreational areas outside. And our feeling is that the size and scale of the 4-story building is big for the neighborhood. There are some larger hotels down along Cabrillo Boulevard, but the neighborhood itself, as you're entering in over the railroad tracks, that's where the neighborhood starts. That's where the gateway to our public, wonderful public beach facilities start. And our feeling is that this project needs to have more of a, and I said this at the ABR feeling, more of a beachy feel. It has to feel more like, oh, we're entering into the beach neighborhood. And so we'd like to have some comments regarding that included in your findings. Also, there's a land use policy that says preserving and enhancing the neighborhood's sense of place. And I think, once again, that also goes along with how the building is fitting into that gateway and into the compact neighborhood. We have some comments about traffic and circulation.
Pardon my interruption, but your 2 minutes is up.
What? I only had 2 minutes.
Sorry.
Okay, can I just say, we had traffic and circulation concerns that weren't addressed in the parking and traffic report. And lastly, will you make sure that the rental units that are market rate are reserved for Santa Barbara residents and not given to people who are going to just rent them and come on the weekends?
Thank you. With that, I don't have any more speaker slips for in-person public comment, so I will move to virtual participation, which I see 2 hands raised, but if anyone else would like to speak, you can raise your hand at this time. Kevin Heim, I'm going to give you permission to speak, so you should be able to unmute. And Ms. Harris, if you could put the timer on the, thank you.
Thank you. So a couple of things. I submitted a written comment, but I just want to expand on a few things. On the coastal development permit, this project will not block coastal access or remove existing recreation facilities, doesn't introduce any new hazards or significant adverse effects to coastal resources. And so given these characteristics, I think the permit, should be approved, and it's consistent with the principles of the California Coastal Act. On the CEQA determination, it's permitted under Section 15183 for streamlined environmental reviews for projects consistent with the density and development policies established by the community. The city's housing sites inventory and general plan already contemplate development here and at this intensity, and no substantial new impacts or unusual circumstances have been identified that would require project-specific CEQA analysis. So I think the 15183 exemption is appropriate. And just again, this is a really urgent project. Delays in acting on environmental review have already triggered a Housing Accountability Act notice of environmental delay for this property, underscoring the need for timely lawful approvals when projects meet applicable standards. And moving this application forward sends a clear signal that our community here is committed to producing infill housing where its plans already say it belongs. I live across the 101 in the East Side neighborhood. We need more housing. It's ridiculously expensive here, and we're only going to lose people over time in our community if we can't build more affordable housing and more market rate housing to relieve the pressure on the existing housing stock. So I encourage you to adopt the CEQA determination under 15183, approve the coastal development permit, and approve the subdivision map consistent with the staff recommendations and conditions. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Alex Graviner. You should be able to unmute.
Hello. I don't have as precise technical knowledge as Kevin, but I'm also a resident of the East Side, living on the other side of the 101. And I'm here to urge you to please follow the staff recommendation and approve the permits for this project. We're clearly in a housing shortage. This is a great project. It's mixed use. It's got residential and the grocery store right there, which is exactly what the city is looking for. The concessions that they're looking for are very reasonable. The height limit exceeding, as staff mentioned, it's just really for that bathroom. So there's really not that much of a height limit exemption. Parking, I think, really is in a great area for active transportation, and I think we should really be encouraging that as a city. And then with the traffic flow onto Milpas Street, there's already that existing commercial usage of the driveway that goes onto Milpas. So I think there's really not any reason to not approve this project with what's before the board today. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, I don't see any other hands raised, so I will just acknowledge that we received written correspondence from Caroline and Nick Howell, Ray Fazenden, Stephanie Diaz, Kevin Heim, Kenny Smith, and 2 submissions from Danae Dworacek, and give it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Carmen, and thank you to all the members of the public that spoke today. I did review all of the public comments that came in as well via email or paper. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment at this time. And I do have a number of questions. So bear with me here. I've got notes kind of all over. And then I will provide comments as well. Maybe before I jump into let me start with questions here. So I think one of the things that came up in the one of the public comments was around the timing for, and this is probably for Ms. Peugeot, it's related to CEQA, around the timing of the geotechnical report. And so wanted to understand, whether that report was still valid and what the process would be for the applicant as they perhaps could move further in the process, and if they need to get any kind of amendment to that plan.
Ms. Harris, so as you know, this process was a multi-year process, and they submitted that report as part of their application package. As part of preliminary review, staff review existing conditions and environmental screening factors to determine if special studies are needed. One of them, what was flagged, was a geologic report. And what planning staff are looking for in terms of CEQA and policy consistency are much different to geotechnical engineering current standards. Planning staff are really looking for, is there going to be an environmental impact in terms of CEQA, which is like if there's a fault hazard or a fault line on the property, if there's like a slopes instability hazard, something like that, which are a much lower bar, and the site doesn't contain anything like that. The applicant will be required to submit a final geotechnical report with the building permits. And that will have to meet the current geotechnical standards. And what the report demonstrates is that the project can be constructed, with the report that was submitted demonstrates that the project can be constructed with geotechnical recommendations, and that's pretty typical for a project like this.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Peugeot. I'm going to keep you up there for one more. Another question, this perhaps could also go to CSG, but wanted to have a little bit more of an explanation around the 15183, particularly for the public, when that gets used. I know there was, I think, a comment in there that sort of seemed to reference infill exemption, which is not being used. So wanted just sort of the opportunity for you to explain a little bit more about the 15183 process.
Yes, of course. This process is 15183. It is not the infill exemption. The infill exemption is a categorical exemption. And many projects of this size and scope in other scenarios may qualify for a categorical exemption. However, with this site, there is a leaking underground storage tank, and because of that, the CEQA guidelines have a specific exception that states that a categorical exemption cannot be used for sites with a LUS site. In the context of Santa Barbara, that's often almost a technicality because there are other sites with site contamination that are allowed to proceed with an exemption under the CEQA guidelines. And all site contamination, whether it's a LUS site or another type of contamination, is regulated by multiple agencies, including the Regional Water Quality Control Board, Environmental Health Services, and the Air Pollution Control District. And owners of properties are required by state law to remediate any site contamination that they have on their property. And so because of that specific exception in the CEQA guidelines about leaking underground storage tanks, staff looked instead to the CEQA streamlining process under 15183. And to qualify, a project needs to meet two criteria. One is that they are consistent with the general plan and zoning, which this project is. And the second criteria is that there needs to be a certified general plan EIR, which the city has, and it was certified in 2011. And so the next step in the process is to prepare an initial study environmental checklist, which staff contracted with CSG to prepare. And that review found that there were no new significant impacts and no peculiar impacts, and that consistency with existing regulations and standard development conditions would essentially eliminate any impacts and reduce impacts to less than significant. I'll add that there was case law recently from last year that basically directs agencies to use CEQA streamlining when that is an available option, as opposed to a longer CEQA process. At this point, if I may, I'd like to turn over to CSG to maybe briefly introduce themselves and add anything that they wish to add.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I've Glenn and Kelly, correct? I've given both Glenn and Kelly permission to speak, so whoever wants to unmute, you can at this time.
Good morning, this is Glenn LaJoy. I am the project manager and director of environmental planning here at CSG, and the comments from Julia are spot on in terms of the 15183 regulations, and the city has fully complied with the requirements of CEQA, and no new significant impacts have been identified. Kelly, do you have any additional feedback?
I do not. You covered it.
Great, thank you. And just wanted to get sort of one clarification with it. So with the general plan from 2011 and the build out associated with that at the time, contemplating for the entire city, want to get an understanding for how that relates to what the suitable sites inventory said, which was 27 units, and then what the project is proposing, which is more than that. And if the general plan contemplated, more units in general in this area, and that's why we're able to use that. if you're following me,
Yes.
Ms. Pujol.
Yes, Ms. Harris. There were a number of addenda that are also connected to the general plan. One of them is for the AUD program. And also, I'll note that we have a draft housing plan, EIR, that is out for, the public review period closed, but is out right now, that does analyze that higher RENA scenario and identifies suitable sites.
Great, thank you. Okay, let me find the next one. The next one is probably best suited for the applicant. So in the, in the prior proposal, the prior proposal included 99 units, and it also included 122 covered and 5 uncovered spaces. And so there were a number of extra parking spaces in the prior proposal. My question for this current proposal is really how you anticipate dealing with guest parking or parking for residents that may have people over or may have events or other things, and where that would happen on the site.
I'll give it a shot, and then Brian can, and then we've also got Scott Shell here. But
Great.
I would say when they do traffic analysis, they use ITE rates for that, and those rates are a given rate per unit type, and that includes all of that kind of traffic. So it isn't specific to only residents of that unit. It includes all traffic that a unit could generate, which incorporates things like guests visiting the unit. And then based off of those rates, that's how we determine what peak demands are. So that's accounted for in those rates. And if I got that completely wrong, Scott can tell you. Scott says I got it right. All right.
Yeah, I would just add, I think Ms. Burkhart did a good job of explaining the parking resources in the neighborhood. We are actually increasing the street parking because of the removal of those curb cuts. And, you know, the reality also is that all residents will not be in place at the same time. So I think there will end up being even available parking within that parking structure.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful. And, you know, whether or not those spaces are sort of designated by unit is something I'll let, you know, that the applicant decide, and perhaps that's something to pass along to ABR as well. But just keeping in mind that there might be times where there are people over at a unit, and I do want to be mindful of, there is a condition that does not allow for a residential street permit for this site, so I wanted to make sure that the applicant was aware of that. And, you know, with the expectation that if there's parking specifically for Tri-County produce, that is really for Tri-County produce, and there's not guests or residents that are parking in that parking location and taking up spaces for the commercial operation. So, you know, just making that note there, that is an important factor. All right, let me go to the next one. I have a few questions around the transportation items. So this one probably both for ATE and for the third-party EPD. So I'm really hoping that you can kind of just walk me through some of your findings, and really particularly around the concerns that were raised for driveways, parking, and loading, and particularly just the potential for queuing on Milpas itself, and how those impacts may be negligible.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Harris, could I just state something before Scott gets into
Yes.
the technical parts of this? I just want to make sure that it's on the record in the hearing that the actual frontage improvements on Milpas, including both of those existing driveways, those were constructed by the city of Santa Barbara. I negotiated that set of frontage improvements with the city on behalf of the previous property owner, the Dixon family. And that's where Public Works determined were the best place to put those driveways in place of, like, that entire frontage used to just be one big curb cut. And when they redesigned the parking area, Public Works staff determined to put those driveways where they are.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gorin. And perhaps particularly for Scott or our other consultant to really talk more about, with the commercial site, if there's with the, slight increase to the overall commercial square footage, and then just how the addition of vehicles might impact or not impact the Milpas area. So if you could just give us sort of a general overview there. And then I've got a couple questions around loading after that.
Okay. Hi, I'm Scott Shell with Associated Transportation Engineers. Is this thing on? Okay. Usually I'm louder. So those are good questions. We did a pretty exhaustive analysis of the traffic impacts for policy consistency as well as the queuing on Milpas Street. So we looked at the existing conditions, which you have to remember, there's not just tri-counties there, but there's also all of the light industrial, which I believe Brian said was about 11,000 square feet or so, that will be removed. It's actually more than that. But so the analysis that we did did a very detailed look at what the queuing would be. There was comments from Derek Bailey, transportation staff, about are the turn lanes going to be adequate? So we looked at the southbound turn that, as Jarrett said, was constructed by Public Works and said that the storage in that to turning into the market would be adequate. We also looked at how much traffic would be added to the adjacent intersections for that policy consistency and found that that would be consistent as well. I think, I don't know the initials of the peer review team, but they reviewed all of our work and basically concurred with our findings. So it was pretty exhaustive. We did the first study, was a little one, and then there was a larger one in response to the very detailed comments that we got back from the city.
Okay, great. Thank you. And do we have the third-party peer reviewer with us today as well?
We do, Ms. Harris. I think Ms. Carmen would have to unmute them.
Megan, correct? Yeah. She has been given permission to speak if she would like to.
So Megan, if you have anything to add just on, as the third-party reviewer, your findings, just really wanted to sort of reiterate your findings from just those that might be listening to this meeting for the public.
Sure, and my colleague, Michael Torres, is also on, who actually prepared the peer review and wrote up the memo, so I'll defer to him if I get any of this wrong. But it was our opinion, after reviewing the studies that had been done, that we agreed that there really is not a significant increase in traffic generated by the project that would cause any kind of queuing issues at the rail crossing. It was the additional trips are really going to come from the residential project. And so while there might be concern about increasing the square footage of the retail use, it's still the same business, right? They're going to have very similar operations as to what they have historically had. And when we looked at the pattern of accidents in the area, we didn't see any accidents that are really associated with turns in and out of the driveways. Or traffic being generated by that business. So I think that's where we felt like the studies, we agreed with the conclusions of the studies and didn't have any new significant concerns regarding the queuing on Milpas.
Great, thank you. Another question around loading, since that would come off of Calle Puerto Vallarta. Wanted to understand sort of if the applicant knows what the loading operations are at Tri-County Produce currently, if there are certain set times that they typically get trucks or are doing loading or unloading, or if that is extremely variable.
Ms. Harris, I think it is extremely variable just because of those other uses that are on the site that are going to be demolished. But ultimately, what this new configuration resulted in is the addition is the likely place for the back of house for the market, and trying to allow for a maneuver of the truck in the parking lot would have removed significant number of public parking spaces. And the reality is that everyone has agreed that most of this loading is going to be in the early mornings and off-peak. So really the simplest solution is that loading off of Calle Puerto Vallarta, and the ability then to maneuver easily and not get stuck in that existing parking lot.
Great, thank you. One moment. Okay. Let's see. Give me one moment. I've got lots of notes all over, so just wanting to make sure I get all the questions. Okay, and I wanted to confirm that the applicant had seen on page 15 that the project would be conditioned to widen the sidewalk along Calle Puerto Vallarta, add street lighting, add an access ramp at the corner of both Calle Puerto Vallarta and Corona Del Mar, and that you're amenable to that.
We are.
Correct, okay. And that all conditions of approval you are amenable to that are in the staff report.
Yeah, we are.
Okay. And then, let's see. I do really want to find a way, and perhaps Ms. Burkhart, you can help me here with, maybe this is just as simple as signage, but having some kind of indication that the parking spaces that are affiliated with the market during market hours would be for the market, and not for other uses.
Ms. Harris, I think I agree. Signage would be an appropriate way to condition that.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, and then I've got a few other items just based on some of the public comments that had come in. Okay. There was a comment around noise, dust, and vibration related to construction. So I do believe there's some general conditions of approval that are in there around construction, but wanted to understand from the applicant, how you might address those types of concerns, particularly around construction.
Ms. Harris, our general procedure is to follow the city's standard requirements. Those have been developed over years specifically to address these impacts, which are impacts of all construction projects. So we don't come up with some separate specific plan. We do what the city's tried and true methods are, and we just implement what's in our conditions.
Great, and you would abide by those conditions?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. There was also a concern around natural ventilation, around, I think, air ventilation for the neighboring property. In one of the public comments, I think just perhaps this was related to the height of the structure in relation to the buildings that are adjacent. Perhaps this one is for you, Mr. Kernal. Just how did you look at the sort of overall siting in relation to the neighboring properties, and would there be any concern around light or light access for other properties in the area?
Ms. Harris, I don't think there's going to be any issue of light access for the neighboring properties because the neighboring properties are all south, basically, of our property. So we're not going to be blocking certainly any solar access. And we have worked hard to modulate the massing along Calle Puerto Vallarta so that it does not appear as a consistent four-story mass. And, I don't imagine that, there's any light pollution there. Obviously, the windows of the units are along Calle Puerto Vallarta, or some of them, but I can't imagine that creating any kind of light pollution issue for the neighbors.
Okay, great. The next one I have, there was a comment in there really more related to the railroad, and I will state that the city is not managing the railroad, so I cannot indicate when a train would come or not come. But there have been a number of fatalities that have occurred in this general area just in the last year, and so this commenter brought up some safety concerns. And I was hoping the applicant could just speak to how there may or may not be any kind of barrier between the residential property or the market property and the actual train tracks.
Yeah, we do have a fence that will be continuous along that railroad right-of-way, and there will be no access between the uses here and the railroad property. So it's actually a much improved condition than what exists today, which is just there's no delineation at all of where that railroad easement is, and there's vehicles that routinely park within it. So I think we're actually improving that issue.
Okay, great. And then this one might be for you, Ms. Burkhart, but can you just explain, I know it was explained by the applicant a little bit earlier, but how the railroad easement still can be used when looking at the residential construction on one of these lots?
Sure, Ms. Harris, I think what's unusual in this case is that the land is not owned by the railroad, the land under the railroad within the easement. So in this case, it is owned by the project property owner.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you for correcting me there. I apologize.
Sure, no problem. But I think that's important to understand for the public as well. It's a bit unusual that the railroad doesn't own the property. So there is an easement for the railroad use. There can't be a development in that area. There are restrictions on access in that area. However, the square footage of that area is included in the net lot area of the site. As Mr. Gorin mentioned, it's in our definition of net floor area, or net lot area, I'm sorry. You take the gross lot area of the site and you subtract public right-of-way, which the railroad is not considered public right-of-way, so it is included in that calculation.
Yeah, and Ms. Harris, if I can just, we obviously routinely have buildings that are built right to property lines, and we do have to obtain access rights from those owners for various aspects of the construction. I think Mr. Gorin already mentioned that we'd really be doing the vast majority within our site constraint, but there will be times like when we need to plaster the exterior of the building or paint it that we'll need to get access. Since it's the railroad, I'm sure we'll need to be very diligent about getting that approval from them early on, because it probably takes a little longer than it does a normal property owner. But I'm confident that will be allowed, and that we'll be able to do this without any issues.
Yeah, I would also just add that this question, it's sort of like a big question. It was the very first question that the property developers asked me before they were even involved in the project. And then it was a question specifically to city staff on the original pre-app for the project. And the city confirmed at that time as well that this area counts as part of a lot area and for the density calculation.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I've got a couple more things here, but as I go through the rest, I'm going to start out by, again, thanking the public both that have written in, that have come in and communicated their views and expressed wishes for what happens on the site. I will note, I also want to thank the applicant. I do think that this is an extremely challenging site to develop with just the location of the site adjacent to the railroad. It is an odd-shaped lot. And I do think that as was mentioned in the staff report, I do think that the change from the original proposal to now is of great benefit to the community, particularly in keeping a real treasure, not only for the East Beach neighborhood, but really for the entire city, with Tri-County produce remaining. So very appreciative of that. And I think overall the community in the area is appreciative of that as well. I do also think that the improvements that are made to that building are going to be of great benefit. So by having the expanded space for the market and a bit of storage space that's been added on, along with the area for loading and the patio area in the front that will allow for some outdoor seating, is just a real is a benefit overall to that market, and hopefully will help sustain the market in the long term, and allow for people to sort of sit and mingle and interact differently than what's possible today. In terms of the loading zone, it is a bit different from what some groceries experience. However, there are many stores that have loading in this configuration as well. So I do want to note that throughout the city, there is loading that can happen on the street, and that is not uncommon. So I appreciate the location of the loading. One of the things in looking at the project is that I do want to be mindful of the potential impact of trucks coming in and out, loading and unloading on the site. And so if the applicant is amenable, I would like to put a condition of approval that loading would occur outside of peak hour traffic on the property, to ensure that really, as hopefully they're already operating, it's most likely they're there early morning hours or later in the evening, as many grocers are, and not necessarily in the middle of peak traffic time. Is that something that you are amenable to?
It is, and I think it might be beneficial to state what those peak hours are so that anybody in the public understands what those are as well.
Yes. Ms. Burkhart, do you have that or Ms. Arciniego or Ms. Peugeot, do you know peak hour traffic?
It's 7 to 9 and 4 to 6.
Okay.
So 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay. Could we, and then maybe Ms. Burkhart, so tentatively we will put it as that, but if you could confirm that maybe with our third-party consultant as well, that's the appropriate time. I was thinking 3 to 6, but I'm fine with 4 to 6 if our consultant is comfortable with that. Okay. And then I do have a number of other things. So we talked about the signage in the parking for the market. I do want to put a condition of approval that no short-term rental units would be allowed for the residential property, that they would need to be occupied by longer-term tenants. So maybe Ms. Burkhart, you can help me just with writing that out after the hearing, but that's the intention there.
Sure, no problem, Ms. Harris.
Okay, and then, so I also, and I believe there actually may be a condition of approval as I was relooking in it, but I wanted to put a condition of approval that coordination with the utility company would occur to determine whether undergrounding of the guide pole that was seen out on site is possible. It may not be possible, I recognize that, but I want to ensure that there's at least some communication that's happening to see to see if we can get as much undergrounding of that as possible.
So just to be clear, you'd like us to try to eliminate that guy pole?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Ms. Harris, where exactly is that
It's
located?
on Calle Puerto Vallarta. It is sort of in the middle, I want to say, of where the residential development is located.
Yeah, there's one pole closer to Milpas that is being removed. And then there is an additional pole that we showed to remain on the site plan. That's probably, I'm going to guess, 50, 60 feet to the east.
Okay.
And it turns out that is not a power pole, it's just a pole that is providing a guy up to the large pole across Calle Puerto Vallarta.
Yes, and the intention for that is by, the
Try to remove
project
it.
is undergrounding other utilities, and I do think the experience overall, actually for for those that are living on the property and for those that are going to Tri-County Produce will be improved just from the sidewalk standpoint. So if it's possible, at least some level of coordination to see if that can happen. I also wanted to place a condition of approval. So and maybe this is more a question, but my understanding is that a general construction permit will be needed from the Regional Water Quality Control Board for dewatering or for and during construction. Is that correct, Ms. Burkhart or Ms. Peugeot?
Ms. Harris, that is my understanding. If dewatering is required, they would need that permit from the Regional Water
Okay.
Quality Control Board. This would be determined at building permit with a further report.
Okay, and where I'm going with this is suggesting that there's a condition of approval that's placed where the applicant submit documentation for compliance for dewatering to the city if that is deemed to be required at building permit time.
Okay. Ms. Harris, I also want to add that because of the size of the project site, the applicant will be required to do a general construction permit with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, regardless of if there's dewatering or not.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ms. Peugeot. So I'm also going to, it'll be required regardless, but I'm also going to add a condition of approval that says that they will need a general construction permit from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And then I'd also like to add a condition that limits or restricts any construction work to occur outside of the railroad easement unless permission from the railroad is granted to the property owner. And that if that permission is granted, that be submitted to the city. So far, just checking in with the applicant. Are you comfortable with all of those?
Ms. Harris, I'm comfortable with all of them except for the last one. And it's the easement, technically, I guess it's a private easement of the railroad over us. And in general, I get uncomfortable when the city gets involved with enforcing provisions of private easements, and we're going to be talking with them. It's really between us and them what we're allowed to do in there, and I'd prefer not to have the city having to be a third party arbitrating what we and the railroad agree to.
Understood, Mr. Gorin. There have been some concerns raised from the public around the easement in general. So what I'm trying to get at is sort of ensuring that there are limitations for what could happen there. Perhaps what we could do instead is, as we get complaints or if there is some kind of agreement made that I don't necessarily need something from the railroad in writing, but ideally something from the applicant, an email over to the project planner or building staff, just indicating that you've spoken with the railroad and they have allowed construction to occur would be great.
We would be comfortable with that.
Okay, great. The other, just one other, one of the comments had a request for construction hours to operate from 8 to 5. Normally, I believe our condition of approval is a 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so I wanted to understand what the, if the applicant was amenable to doing construction from 8 to 5. With the opportunity to be on site before 8 a.m., but not actually using construction equipment that might cause noise until 8 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, that's the important thing, is because the workers are going to show up, and we need to be able to queue and do the things necessary to begin construction. But I think we could agree to no, noise producing construction before 8 a.m.
That would be great. All right.
Ms. Harris, along with that condition, since we're actually narrowing it beyond a city standard condition, could you specifically state that staging is excluded from that?
Yes, staging would be excluded from the 8 to 5 hours of operation. For construction, what I'm really trying to get at is where there is noise that may be more akin to a construction site, like, forklift, a lot of moving of construction material, that type of thing, that not begin until 8 a.m. But you can stage, you can have.
If we say, heavy noise producing activity, I guess, whatever the right terminology is, which would suggest,
I'd be okay with that.
Heavy equipment, hammering, that kind of thing.
I would be that. Is that, do you have that, Ms. Burkhart? Or we will work on,
I'm
yes,
taking
great,
notes, but
great, thank
we'll
you.
review the draft.
Okay, great. Okay, so with that, you can probably see where I am going here. But I really do appreciate the project. There has been a lot of work done from staff, from the applicant, from the number of consultants that have been on the project. There are a number of technical reports that have been submitted for the site. Again, it's a really challenging project area. It's a really challenging parcel in general, being very close to the highway, being very close to Union Pacific Railroad. It's really a triangle configuration. And so being able to redevelop the site, I think honestly is fantastic and will be a benefit to the overall community. I recognize the concerns that some members of the public have about what I understood it as was really the increase in residents and the feeling that the structure may be larger in scale than the other areas of the neighborhood. However, I do believe that in many ways, Tri-County Produce is a gateway and will be an enhanced gateway for this community with this design. So I do think that this actually will provide a really excellent gateway for this beach community. Certainly, as the project moves forward with the Architectural Board of Review, I know there was a comment today around having more of a beachy vibe, and while I don't think that necessarily means reducing, any kind of units, and that is not what I'm suggesting, but if there's some design consideration there, that's something that I would pass along to the Architectural Board of Review and really get their expertise on. I do think that the design, looks great, but that is outside of my purview. In regard to the number of units on the site, for when we do the suitable sites inventory for RENA, we are looking at a number of different properties throughout the city, and at the time 27 units was proposed. for this site. When we do that, we're not necessarily going into the level of detail or depth that a specific project might go into, and don't have necessarily the expertise to really indicate how could we place more units perhaps than what is there. So I do actually appreciate the additional number of units that have been placed on the lot, and recognize that it's about half of what was previously proposed. I think that the mix of units, the studio 1s and 2 bedrooms, will be a great benefit, particularly because they will not be used for short-term rentals or hotel type uses, but are used for residents that will be living in the area. And it is a much needed, housing in general is really needed and desired in the city, and it is a priority for the city. So I want to just really commend the applicant for that. Let's see. There are also a number of public improvements that are being made to these sites, so I am very appreciative of those improvements, the sidewalk improvements, the lighting improvements. I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the landscaping improvements. One of the, I know we have Nicole, I believe, from for the landscaping piece, and one of the things, just as I noticed, I believe it was city placed, but just how to sort of integrate the front of the site where the outdoor sort of tables and seating maybe with the sidewalk, and making that, just ensuring that the landscaping is really adding to the site. So I think it's going to do that, which is great. Let's see. I do recognize that there have been a number of comments and concerns around traffic impacts and loading and parking, and I have read through all of the documents and understand through the staff report really the back and forth that have gone through. I think that the right approach was taken, in the sense that when a disagreement arises, we do often bring in a third-party consultant to determine, to make sort of a final determination. And so I do trust that the city's third-party consultant really looked at it from that lens of, just from their own lens and trying to understand what the different issues were. And so with that, and them saying that they don't believe that this will have the non-residential will have traffic impact, I would agree with that there. I think that with some of the conditions of approval that have been placed, that the parking, what I'm trying to get at that for the community is just to ensure that the street parking is not going to be taken up by the new residences. So, that is a really important factor, and I recognize that's an important factor for the existing community there. And I think with the number of parking spaces on site, as well as the number of bike parking spaces, and the limitation of not being able to park in the market, and not being able to get street residential parking permits, that hopefully will help address that. There's the other condition of approval is I did want to ensure that there's a condition of approval placed on the project that requires that parking access standards are met. So that is something that would happen in the building permit regardless, but at this point, I do want to place that condition of approval that prior to obtaining your building permit, all parking access standards are met. And so that is sort of a more specific detail, but there may need to be adjustments or changes if access standards cannot be met at this time. So wanted to add that as well. I want to also just, really reiterate that I think there is a benefit to having that retaining this community asset is actually a pretty big deal. And it's a big deal for the neighborhood that's immediately adjacent to it. It's a big deal in terms of our coastal land use plan and looking at our coastal resource policies and having a market next to coastal resources, including residences, hotels, the beach, is an important factor. It is something that is otherwise missing right in that immediate neighborhood. So that is certainly appreciated. And I do also appreciate the addition of some of the street parking on Calle Puerto Vallarta because of the removal of many of the curb cuts. So I do think there will be a benefit overall in terms of street parking to the neighborhood there. Let's see. I think those are the main conditions of approval those are the conditions of approval I have. Those are the comments I have. There was one other condition, Ms. Burkhart, that you had mentioned in your presentation to add. So can you remind me of that one? I would also like to add that.
Ms. Harris, yes, that is a condition that the corrective action plan and any related remedial measures be completed. I have it drafted and I can add it to the draft document for your review.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Can we actually hear that condition?
I'll read you how I have it drafted at the moment. Completion of the corrective action plan and all related remedial measures pursuant to the findings of the supplemental site assessment and all requirements of the Central Coast Regional Water Control Board and the Santa Barbara County Environmental Health Services. And I would have that as a requirement prior to permit issuance. I think would be a good place for it.
Is there a way to just change it to as demonstrated by clearance from the agency? So in other words, there's a potential that they might actually clear us for issuance and have some of this work occur during the site preparation of this building permit, but it'll be very specific in the scope of the permit. So I don't want us to accidentally tie our hands on being able to get started on construction when the agencies themselves might be comfortable with it, but we've got a project condition that says we can't get issuance until it's actually signed off. Because like a lot of what this might involve would be excavating soil.
Well, it may also involve demolition of some of the existing buildings. So I think that, we wouldn't want it to be prior to a demolition permit.
Yeah, I think if we could rely on the agency issuance, I think that might be, I don't know if that's not deferred mitigation, because we're relying on the standard processes they already have in place to review this and grant clearance for the project. So I'd like to have like Protection Services and EHS be the arbiters of the clearance.
I see Ms. Peugeot, you've come up to the podium. Do you have any insight into how to sort of rectify this condition of approval?
Ms. Harris, I think there's kind of two steps here, perhaps. One is at the building permit issuance, and one is at prior to occupancy. So one step could be the corrective action plan, and then prior to building permit, and then prior to occupancy would be the needed remedial measures.
I like that approach. Are you amenable to that? As the
Yeah, we
applicant?
are.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, I wanted to make note, there were a lot of there was a lot of consistency analysis done in the staff report, which I am, certainly agreeable to in terms of parking, loading, setbacks, building height, outdoor living space, variable density. Many things discussed in the staff report, but in particular wanted to talk about a couple of the policy consistency sections. So in terms of neighborhood and mixed-use planning, there's a policy that encourages a variety of housing types and affordability ranges and neighborhood serving commercial uses. And so with Tri-County Produce as a smaller market in an area that is not not being served by a market already, and by offering a variety of housing types and affordability ranges, I do think that this project meets that policy. Under our economy and fiscal health element policies, again, the addition to the existing building for Tri-County Produce that's proposed is about 4,000 square feet. It's actually, as Mr. Kernall mentioned, it was a reduction from what the commercial use on site currently is. And so with 11,000 square feet being demolished and 4,000 being added, there's still a net loss there. But with that addition to the building to accommodate storage, that is currently, I believe, provided in one of the buildings that would be demolished. It helps support the market, allows it to be really a full service market, allows it to expand in some ways, and is again an important service for recreational facilities, for the beach, for hotels in the area, for residents, workers, and shoppers in the neighborhood. So I wanted to note that I do find that it's consistent with that policy. In terms of increased densities for affordable housing under the land use element, there are a few policies there that talk about residential growth, and in particular around residential growth near transit and commercial services. This is an area that I think, again, I am impressed with the ability to place these number of units on the site for it to be consistent with the general area. I do think the design will fit in nicely with the neighborhood. And so by bringing in additional housing opportunity near that area, while I recognize that some of the neighbors do have a concern there, I think it is an opportunity for the city. It is a much reduced project from what had existed previously. And I think overall it will be sited well, and the sort of limited access for the residential parcel, I think, will also help in minimizing any kind of impact there. There's in terms of visual resources, so that had come up a number of different times, and we look at visual resources in a number of different ways. We look at whether something is considered a scenic resource, and that typically includes vista points, parks, trees, designated structures of merit, landmarks, state scenic highways, and what are considered cones of view. And so what I wanted to mention is what that cones of view really means, as there was some concern around visual impact. So a cone of view gives a background and a foreground view of the site, whether it has a positive, negative, or neutral cone of view. And that was looked at by staff and determined that the site is not within any cone of view. So again, the site's located very close to the 101 freeway, very close to the railroad. It's also near Cabrillo Ballpark, which is a scenic resource located to the southwest. But this site itself is not a scenic resource, and does not have any scenic vistas from the project. They also, with sort of concerns raised around that, the city's Architectural Board of Review is really tasked with the responsibility of promoting general public welfare to help preserve the aesthetic appeal of the city. So and they have reviewed the project multiple times, as was described, and had favorable comments for the site. In terms of the next, parking and coastal access, the project has been conditioned to have a number of public improvements adjacent to the property, and I do appreciate the applicant for doing that and for generally improving that area. It also will include a number of bicycle parking spaces on the property, which I think will be a good amenity, both for the residential uses as well as a we discussed sort of the overall parking areas, and I think with some of the conditions of approval that had been proposed, that will help with any concerns around parking. But there is sufficient parking for the site. Let's see. In terms of traffic, we had both EPD here today and we had ATE here from the applicant side. ETD is the third-party reviewer that was hired by the city. There had been a number of comments going about transportation, but with the evaluation, particularly of EPD, that looked at both commenting groups, found that the ATE traffic analysis, that even when considering the residential use, that the project impacts to the intersection operations and to queuing and to site access were not determined to be significant. So I do want to note that and appreciate the review from EPD. And then I'm going to go ahead and start to make the findings for the project. And again, these findings, I am going to move to approve the project subject to the findings that I'm about to make, but with the number of conditions that I have mentioned to add in during this hearing as well. So let me just pull up these slides so that okay. So first is going to be around environmental review. So again, and really appreciate staff for being here today to talk through what section 15183 is used for, that projects are consistent with a community plan or zoning. And so the project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15183 of CEQA because it's consistent, again, with the development of density that was established under the general plan from 2011 that was approved by the city, and that had an EIR that was certified evaluating additional residential growth in the area. I am going to go in now to the tentative map findings. There are a number of tentative map findings that I will go ahead and read out. For a tentative subdivision map, including all of the conditions of approval that have been placed on the project, as well as the conditions that have been included in the staff report, I am finding that the map complies with the requirements and conditions of the Subdivision Map Act of the Municipal Code. As it's been outlined in the staff report, I do think that by making these two APNs into two separate parcels provides an opportunity for the residential development to occur separately from the development of the commercial property, and certainly is done in a consistent manner with the MAP Act. And so the tentative subdivision map is consistent with the general plan. As I mentioned, the number of general plan policies, it depicts a land division and land use which are compatible with the policies and programs that are specified in the general plan. The MAP Act the tentative subdivision map is also consistent with the zoning ordinance of the city of Santa Barbara as indicated in the staff report. The design of the development with the conditions of approval that have been placed is consistent with the general and specific plans affiliated with this site because it allows for the existing commercial market to exist in place and continue to operate while also constructing the new multi-unit residential use. And really that's a appropriate area for infill. It's appropriate in terms of the zoning for the site. The site is also physically suitable for the development due to its 1.73 acre in size. It's in a commercially zoned area of the east of the neighborhood, of the East Beach neighborhood that will maintain the existing commercial market. The site is also physically suitable for development because it proposes the 53-unit residential development, which is at 30 dwelling units per acre. It's using state density bonus law in an area of the city that has a general land use designation for medium-high density residential, and is zoned for commercial and multi-unit residential development. It'll maintain an existing market, as has been mentioned. The design of the project will not cause substantial environmental damage or impact fish or wildlife and their habitat. There's no habitat that's been identified on the site. The design of the development with the conditions of approval will also not cause serious public health problems. It will clean up the existing site contamination to a level that's acceptable for residential unit uses overall, and really a net benefit, not just for the residential uses, but for the entire area by doing so. And it also will maintain the existing commercial market. The development of the improvement will also not conflict with the easements acquired by the public at large for access through or use of the property within the proposed development. The design is accommodating the existing railroad easement for railroad purposes, and as we've discussed in this hearing. And then the tentative map act provides for dedication of public access to natural resources of the subdivision map act. There's no natural resources in the vicinity of the project, and so there really is no ability of the project to provide access to those natural resources. I will say, there's some great public amenities, though, very adjacent to the site, and that'll be a benefit for the residents here. And then the final finding for the for the Subdivision Map Act is discharge of waste from the proposed development into an existing community sewer system will not result in a violation of existing requirements prescribed by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I do know there's a condition of approval that requires connection to the city sewer system as well that has been accepted. And then I'm going to move on to the findings for the coastal development permit. So I do find that the project is consistent, again, with the Coastal Act and with all of our policies with the city's local coastal plan. So with the conditions of approval, again, it's consistent with the policies of the Coastal Act. It maintains coastal access or public access to the coast. It's not going to impact scenic qualities of the coast. It's not changing coastal resources. The project, with the conditions of approval, is also consistent with the policies of the city's local coastal plan for similar reasons. It also allows for increased densities for affordable housing using the state density bonus law. In a developed area and on a parcel that is able to accommodate such development. And it reduces the amount of non-residential development on the site, maintains access to the coast, and doesn't impact scenic resources. So with those findings, I will go ahead and approve the project. The project is subject to a 10-day appeal period. My decision also can be suspended by any member of the Planning Commission within the same 10 calendar days. And if a member of the public would like to file an appeal, you can do so based on what is up on the screen right now. You can contact planning staff. You can submit an appeal in writing by email. You can submit it by mail, or you can bring it in person. Thank you to staff and to the applicant for being here today, and thank you to the public for really being engaged on this project, and I think also providing great public comments that from some of the conditions of approval I do think have enhanced the project overall. So with that, I will go ahead and close the Staff Hearing Officer meeting for April 15th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.